Welcome back to Sitting with Spirit, my loves. As always, take what resonates, leave the rest. Before we get into Sitting with Spirit, though, I just wanted to shout out our editor, Ashley, is part of a band called the Magnolia Janes, and I just checked them out on Spotify and followed them. It's always nice to support the community, and her music is so lovely. There was one song in particular, The Sun in My Backyard. Oh, it really touched me, and the message behind it was really powerful. So it's always good to support the hummingbird community. And if you're a fan of folk music, check her out. So anyway, getting into the messages, one of the first, and this is not a surprise because this happens all the time where the messages I need personally are also what the collective needs to hear. But a message that was coming through today as I was sitting in the power, which, by the way, little update on my intention for 2025. One of my intentions is more spaciousness. And I've begun to sit in the power for 30 minutes every day, which has just been so beautiful, whether I have readings or not, just for the sake of sitting with spirit and in the power. And it's been so, so precious to me. And one of the messages that came through as I was sitting in the power today was that there's no way that social media does not impact our intuitive read of the collective and of society. You'll see so many psychics, mediums, intuitives, astrologers all saying like 2025 is doom and gloom, so much bad stuff is going to happen, etc., etc. And sure, yes, 2025 might have a lot of the big, heavy hitting outer planets changing signs. There's obviously a lot of change. We're very freshly into 2025. It's January 16th at the time of recording this. And already there has been so much devastation with the wildfires in LA, with war in the Middle East. It's like there's just so much going on. But the message here is that it's really easy to get into a state of misinterpreting collective, subtle, or not so subtle, energetic trends and collective consciousness and mistaking it for intuition. Similar to how a reader has a hard time giving an accurate reading to somebody they know and they care about because we want things to be true for them. We want things to come through and we're not unbiased. It's very similar on the macro scale. It's like we know too much about the world and politics and people and society to give an accurate read on it. It would take somebody from a completely different, maybe like island in the middle of nowhere that didn't know anything about the world to give an unbiased reading, to just give the pure information that was coming through. Because even when we get information, we filter it through what we already know. And that's why readers like to read for complete strangers, because I might read for a dear friend and get a piece of information, but I'm filtering that information through what I know about them and what I want for them versus the actual facts and truth that are just coming through. And so it's very hard. And I think that's why a lot of people, predicted that Kamala was going to win the election and all of these things, because it's so hard to take your biases out of it because we're part of this society. We're intimate with this society. We want things for this society. We have very clear fears attached to this society. And that makes it almost impossible to give clear, intuitive reads on this. And so what you see happening is a lot of doom and gloom in the collective. That doesn't mean that maybe those readers aren't tapping into something that's very real. But what I'm saying is that it's almost impossible to get a clear energetic read from inside the house that's on fire. You have to be outside of the house to get clear energetic reads. And so just take things for the collective, take the messages that are so fear-based and everything like that with an extreme grain of salt, and realize that it's very similar to when we give readings for ourselves. Like self-divination is the most difficult form of divination, and basically reading for the collective as a part of the society is the macro version of self-divination. So take it with a grain of salt, and also realize that we are in this moment where our nervous systems are extremely dysregulated, where we're in a lot of stress and where there's a lot of things happening in the world that feel so insurmountable and so that are just so destructive objectively. that it's also very hard to get intuitive reads on the collective when we are in a nervous system dysregulated state. And so that is why nervous system regulation is an imperative part of intuitive connection. Without it, it is almost actually, yeah, it is impossible to get clear intuitive guidance because we are in fight or flight. We're looking for signs of what we don't want to happen or what we do want to happen. We're extremely attached to outcomes. And so the nervous system is like a biological function of our intuition. When we are about to give a reading, it speeds up. So it almost feels like you're scared, but it's actually just your nervous system speeding up to get you to vibrate at the level that you can then be a medium for angels, ancestors, guides. And so the nervous system being regulated is a really important part of our instrument as intuitive psychics and mediums. And nervous system regulation is going to be imperative for 2025 so that we can sort of drop out of all of the stories, all of the media, all of the projections from other people and into the wisdom of our own body and what the best move is for us and for the collective, moment to moment, breath to breath. And in that vein, another message that came up for me personally is that there's a lot of crown chakra blocks in the collective, which there has always been. And since I started my practice, that's the number one block that I feel because we're in a society that's so designed to keep us in our thinking mind. And that's fine because the thinking mind serves a purpose, but we're just extremely out of balance with it. And so as we're navigating this time where there's a lot of doom and gloom and fear and just big things in the collective as we move through 2025 and 2026. I think that it's also important to realize where our imbalances are with how we consume information and how it's contributing to a crown chakra block. So this isn't saying do not be informed, very much be informed, but then figure out, okay, I'm informed. What are the constructive things that I can do to help my family, my community, and myself and the angelic realm here and now? How can I have boots on the ground? How can I put my witch's hat on and make a magical difference in the world? And then outside of that, it's like, okay, I'm informed. That was the function of me digesting this media. And then where you have to stop it is when you start to co-create with the panic, where your nervous system starts to get dysregulated from the panic, where you start to sort of doom scroll and get addicted to the stress of this whatever news, XYZ, fill in the blank. And so it's really important as we move through this year and next year to have very strong boundaries with the media that we consume. Get the information, decide how you want to move forward with it, and create strong boundaries and do things to actively, tend to yourself and your nervous system. It reminds me of an exercise that I did. I want to say I did this in 2019 or 2018. It was a no complaining for 40 days challenge. And I believe back then I'm trying to remember, but I think it was somebody named Remington Donovan who created this challenge. And somehow I stumbled upon it on Instagram. And my life completely changed. And I learned so many lessons when I stopped complaining for 40 days that, in fact, I extended the challenge for 2 more sets of 40 days. And at the time, I was a waitress. And if you've ever been a waitress, you know that complaining is kind of a part of the job. Like, oh, they triple sat me. Oh, this 4-year-old at my table is bossing me around and I have to listen. Like, there's just so many ways that, you can complain about being a waitress. Oh, these people, they left me a $2 tip. I'm going to have to literally tip out more than I made. I basically paid to wait on them. It's like, there's always something that comes up. But I stopped complaining for 40 days in that challenge. And I realized how frivolous it was. And in that challenge, instead of letting my energy and mental capacity ruminate and swim in these waters of what isn't working, I focused on clarity, solutions, and forward momentum with what was in my power. And I started making more money. I had more energy. People around me flocked to my energy. I was attracting way more good things. It was like such a shift. And that to me is a similar energetic principle to what I'm talking about here. It's like you've gotten the information. You know what's going on in the world. Now, what's in your focus? What's in your power? What can you do here and now? And don't co-create with anything else. I want to put a really strong asterisk next to this, that this doesn't apply to somebody who's in the immediate disaster zone as much. It's not that it doesn't apply. There are certain truths to the principles here. But when you're in survival mode, when you're in deep grief, you need to do whatever you need to do to just get through this. This message is for the people that are not even able to, but have the privilege of being somewhere that they have a little bit more control over their thought process, their environment, and they're not in immediate danger or immediate survival mode. So I want to make that really clear. But this is a master class and will continue to be a master class in our boundaries with social media, news outlets, the propaganda machine, and really coming back to being informed through sources that we trust and not letting our nervous systems. And it's like, I saw this with the California fires, the LA fires. I live, 15 minutes away from one of them that they put out. The other one is about 40 minutes from me. And we got the text, like, get ready to evacuate. And I packed a couple bags. And my mind, I just was the witness. The way my mind was like, this could happen, and then that could happen, and then this could happen, and then everything could be lost. And then you could get caught up, and your husband could be on the other side of town, and blah, blah, blah. It's like, I just witnessed my mind going crazy. And our minds are designed to do that, to keep us safe. Our mind is here to help keep us safe, but there's certain levels that we have to be like, whoa, 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 I'm pulling back the reins. This is not productive. This is not helpful. It's contributing actually to my nervous system dysregulation, which actively makes it harder for me to hear my intuition. And so very strong boundaries with media is what I'm trying to say here. Very strong boundaries with other people's intuitive hits that make you feel dysregulated, and realizing that there is no completely unbiased reading of collective energy from somebody who's a part of this society. So just really want to throw that out there. So this leads me to the first symbol that I saw as I was tuning in, which was a cowboy hat. And it was kind of this like Wild West type of energy where it's like we are in uncharted territory energetically. We're coming into something new. And there was almost this feeling here of approaching it as an adventurer, kind of how the cowboys and people with that spirit came to the wild, wild west to try to get gold and the gold rush and all of these things. Like, what is our version of that? Like, where is the gold that is going to come from this newness, from this bravery, from what we are building and rebuilding? So there is something here about embracing the unknown and recognizing the gifts in it, and that the people that are willing to build something new, there's something too about almost like new forms of wealth, or like our generation's discovery of something that will be a resource or a investment that will lead to great abundance in the future. There's something about opportunity through the unknown, opportunity through bravery, opportunity through forging our way that's coming up, and to sort of embrace the adventure of building something new or going into uncharted territory. Then I saw the symbol of ovaries. And when I see ovaries in any of my readings, it's a sign for divine feminine healing, divine feminine empowerment, really taking care of yourself on a hormone balancing level. And it's just interesting to me how all of these messages tie back into nervous system regulation, because that has been a really important part of my PCOS healing journey as well. So there definitely is something here around divine feminine empowerment, the rising of the divine feminine, the remembering of the divine feminine, tending to our health. All of those things are really coming up this week as well. And then I saw frog as an animal guide. And whenever frog comes up as an animal guide, it's about leap of faith energy. It's about not overthinking things, getting the call of your heart, and just taking the leap. And so all of these things are coming together in a really interesting way, all these messages. And I know that it will make more sense as time goes on, because I know this episode isn't coming out for a while as well. So yeah, leap of faith energy, jumping without overthinking, and just letting that frog, that little leapfrog, be a teacher for us. And so kind of circling back to the message about the mental realms, the crown chakra blocks, this isn't about spiritual bypassing. This isn't about saying like, okay, this is all I have in my control. I'm going to be a robot and notice that and move forward. That is not what this message is about. It's just about not letting yourself almost disassociate in these doom scrolling, low vibrational places. It's better to disconnect from that once you've gotten the information and sit with the uncomfortable feelings coming up, because the external shakeups that have been very difficult to navigate collectively are bringing us back to deeper trauma and inner world, inner child wounds that want to be listened to. And the uncomfortable emotions will 100% relate to what we are currently navigating, like on the collective, but they also will always bring up deeper grief or pain or wounds or things that felt uncontrollable or that we were not in control of from younger times as well. So there's definitely something about these, like right now I'm talking about the fires, but there's just so many mass tragedies that we've navigated collectively that crack our hearts open and our avenues for deeper awakening and activation. And I think a part of that is asking us to just feel our feelings. And that's part of the strategy of what's in our control right now that I was talking about. It's like, okay, I've gotten the information. This is what's in my control. And for me, what's helped is breaking it down into categories. Like for the fires, for example, instead of just being like, oh my gosh, where do I start? It's like, okay, here's where you can volunteer. These are the categories of how I want to donate. These are the categories of how I want to protect my respiratory health. These are the categories of how I want to cultivate community at this time. It's like breaking it down into categories is really helpful as well, I've found. And so that's what I'm trying to get to, is this sort of objective year that's full of just a lot of unknown and intensity, and so far a lot of sadness, at least in LA, but of course a lot of other places as well. It's a time to not let this sort of ineffable sense of dread have us spiraling and reaching for our phones all the time. Connection is fine, but instead starting to see what's in our control, how these news sources and media things can help us. And then once those things have served us and how we need them to, disconnecting from them and doing other things that are in our power. So yeah, just stay in the solutions, stay what's in your control. And part of that is feeling the feelings. We can't skip that. When we go through intense things, we can't go right to the takeaway, the spiritual lesson, and the silver lining. We have to feel our feelings because unfortunately or fortunately, we're humans here in a body. So that being said, I also feel like there's a lot of high highs right now. I feel like the emotional experience on Earth is very polarized at the moment in terms of either living really high highs or really low lows, and it's happening really simultaneously. And we have to find our way to like stay in the middle as much as possible, to like stay in equilibrium, stay in balance, coming back to that sort of hormone balance, feminine health, nervous system regulation, stay in balance as much as possible. So I'm going to start to get into the mediumship now. The first thing that started to come through were roses, and roses felt significant either as a sign or a symbol, or there's just something coming up with red roses. And then I felt a male in spirit who was coming in with an older female. And immediately I was struck with a sense of humor with this gentleman. And I got this feeling that like he would have marched to the beat of his own drum, or there would have been something about him that was unpredictable. Like you never knew what he was going to say, or you never knew what he was going to do, but you felt like you just had to laugh. There was something very funny about him. And then I was seeing like tools, and I felt like there was something about building. I was seeing like a mallet or a hammer, a screwdriver. I just kept feeling like there was something connected to him with building. And then I started to also get this feeling that it was hard to be really close to him. I got this feeling of kind of like secrets, or he was always a step away, or like it was easy to laugh and have a good time, but I feel like he would be less connected with family and more connected with either friends or people outside of the family, or kind of doing his own thing. I kept getting this feeling of like feeling removed, or feeling like he wasn't home a lot, or something like that. And I also got the feeling that he would have been in his, like, it was really hard to place him, but I feel like somewhere between 20s and early 30s. Like, it was very hard to place his age, but he definitely was not an older person to me. He was younger. And then I was seeing a Christmas tree with a star on top, and I felt like there would have been something significant about that, whether that was like something, an ornament attached to him, or a way he was being honored, or a holiday that he was especially connected to. And then I was getting a J name with him. And I wanted to say Josh or Joshua, but a J name. And that could either be who it's for or his name. And I also felt like there would have been at least one or two other siblings with him. And I felt like one would have been a sister. And I also felt like at least he was raised by a grandma. I don't know about the other two, but he was raised by a grandma, and that grandma is in the spirit world with him. And when I was connecting with the grandmother, when she stepped in with him, I smelled really strong smells of hairspray. So I feel like there was something very significant about how she would style her hair, hairspray, etc. And so his message, and I do feel like he, in the vein of secrets, I feel like there would have been something about being closeted with him. I don't want to get too into it, but there were things there about himself that it felt like he didn't know how to explore or accept or open up to or share about. And I feel like there was something there that ties into the message. And the message is, I wish that I didn't decide for you that you couldn't accept me. And so the message is here is, I wish that I let people have the chance to really love me instead of protecting myself by deciding how they would react, or that they wouldn't fully love me, or that they didn't have the capacity. And I feel like the message here is that, like, this distance that he created, that it was hard to get close to him, he doesn't want you to have that. Like, there's this message here for the collective of, let people decide for themselves how they can love you. Don't go around, kind of comes back to this crown chakra block of like thinking you know people, when people can grow and change and evolve. And it's all a protection mechanism of being like, well, they'll say this and they'll decide this, and I might as well not even try to talk about that. But there's a message here of like, let people show you, so that you don't end up on an island of your own making because you've decided how everyone else will react. Give them the choice to love you for who you really are. And he wishes that he would have done that, because I do feel it's like in the spirit world, they don't have regret like we would here. But I do feel that from his human perspective, there's regret that he wishes he would have been closer. He wishes that he wouldn't have stayed so busy. He wishes that he wouldn't have always been gone. Like, there's definitely a message here of, I know now that you would have accepted me. I know now that I could have shared with you. I know now that we both could have grown through love together, and that I didn't need to take on everything myself. And he does really make me aware that articulating his deeper feelings and emotions was not a strength of his. I feel like turning everything into a joke or keeping things fun was like kind of his deflector. And so I also feel like if that's you and you resonate with that and you feel that way, there is something about opening up a little bit deeper, because sometimes like that doesn't include debating with people or arguing with people. It's more about getting deep. Like, this is my biggest fear, or this is why I'm talking like this, or this is shame that I carry. Starting to unravel the ego stories that are like political party or affiliation or job or salary. It's like starting to detangle those and getting to these core pillars of our humanity that every single person can connect with and every single person can go deep with, unless of course you have something diagnosable that you can't. But for the majority, we can all connect to those empathetic centers and stories. And he wishes that he could have gotten there and been a little bit more vulnerable instead of always being in his head as a protection mechanism. So as we continue to go through this time period that is so polarizing and people feel so divided, I think that this beautiful spirit has a great message here of like, cut through down to the deepest feelings of your heart space. Like for me, there have been different family members that I've had really challenging relationships with. And I know a lot of people have, especially feeling like, I've lost my parents to this news system or this indoctrination or this XYZ. It's like, if we can go deeper than that and talk from our heart of like, this terrifies me, this upsets me, this is how I wish that we could connect. It's like if we can get more vulnerable instead of being in the surface level of debating about different issues in the world, but get to the heart of our emotions, might be a beautiful step and a bridge to rebuilding a relationship. So I really hope that these messages were helpful today. I know this was a pretty long sitting with spirit. I haven't recorded one of these in a while. So it just felt really good to give the messages. I'm wishing you all a really beautiful week. Stay safe, stay in love, stay in your heart as much as possible, and I will see you next week.